All right, today's Monday, June 16th. And if you're here, you made it through the massive internet outage last week. Today's topics are number one, the airlines that you used to travel with don't want you to know that they're selling your information. We're going to talk about that. Second story is smartwatches are on everyone's wrist, but there might be some issues there with the actual microphone helping threat actors steal information. Story number three, it's a sad day for CISOs because a lot of them are leaving their jobs. We're going to talk about a recent report around that, and some insights from Troy himself.
All right, this is the DTF Cyber Podcast. I'm Damian.
This is Troy.
And this is Fern. Let's go. Article number one. Let's just pull it up because I want to make sure I reference the exact things that we're talking about.
And before you jump into number one, I wanted to touch on last week's outage. We want to acknowledge the fact just how interconnected this world is. I mean, for those who are well aware what happened, of course, this is not going to come as any surprise. But how often do we see one component or one service that fails or goes down that has this cascading domino effect, right? And I think that's we all felt that last week, and some people felt it more than others. There were massive outages where people went home from work, and there were others that were able to keep trudging along. But always love when these things happen because it really illustrates just how interconnected we are.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a topic for next time, right? How reliant are we becoming on technology? And then how reliant are we becoming on AI eventually?
Exactly.
So maybe something to talk about in the future.
There's a lot of people that they use their chat GPTs and they don't even think about what they're saying. And then it's just like, man, you got to proofread.
Yeah, so if your systems go down or your AI stops working, does that mean you're done? You can't do any work?
We'll talk about it next week, right? But for this week, so this one's actually pretty interesting because I don't travel very much. When I do travel, it's usually we just drive around. I don't really travel like business travel. Like I know you guys travel a lot. I think Troy's seems to be in a city every single week. New city, right? I know you're always leaving town as well, Damian. So I'm probably the one person that stays local the most between the three of us. So I don't have as much exposure as I'm sure you guys might with this. But this is interesting because there is a group called the Airline Reporting Corporation. We're going to call it ARC for short. And what's come out is they've been selling information to Customs and Border Protection, CBP, separate organization, not even related to the travel industry. And the information that is in there, outside of people that are interested in it, another group is ICE as well, right? Very relevant nowadays because if you look at the news with some of the protests going on, things happening in LA, things happening here in Arizona, around the US, there's a lot of people in situations. We'll just say that, right? So what I find interesting about this article is that passenger names, itineraries, payment information, and other things with the ticket sale from the airline to the person is being sold. And they actually released one of the contracts to CBP, an older one, mind you, that says, don't tell anyone we're doing this. So I find it interesting because 8 of the major airlines are involved with this ARC group.
Yeah. And I don't know. Look, forget about who they're selling it to, just the fact that they're selling it. It doesn't make, to me, from a privacy perspective, I have some concerns, right? I've got nothing to hide, right? But I still don't want somebody tracking where I'm traveling other than my family or maybe my employer if I'm traveling on their behalf, right? But I don't know. This is kind of, to me, a little concerning where do we not have basic privacy anymore? Where the government now knows or wants to know where you're going, who's paying for your ticket. Because I think credit card information's in there as well.
Yeah, that was part of it. Yep. So it was
It's quite interesting, though. I think, just to touch on the privacy part, I totally agree. And I take a stance on neither side of this, or, I don't want to publicly take a stance on it. But, coming from the law enforcement background, I assume that anytime I travel on a plane, a train, or any kind of transportation that they're going to share that information with the government. Like you get on an airplane, they got to make sure that you're not a terrorist, that aren't on the OFAC list. In fact, barred from transportation like that, and so on. So I think that we already knew they shared our data with the U.S. government. In this case, sounds more like they shared it with the wrong internal department of the government or whatever it may be. People are definitely more concerned about these things today, but I just assumed the government was sharing that kind of data, and it keeps us all safe, keeps our airlines safe. But I would be a lot more concerned if they were selling this to a private entity that was going to use it to like try to commercialize and sell me something or track me, the way that online ads might do. So I think I'm definitely a lot more comfortable with this.
I agree. Right, there's some safety concerns there, so I'm not saying, either way. Does it go too far though? Right. I mean, I'm more concerned about, can they sell it to other entities where we don't know about? Should they be hiding the fact that they're selling it to the government? Like you said, Troy, I think we already know that was happening. Right. There's people on no-fly lists.
Mm-hmm.
But what about other entities? Are they selling them there too that we just don't know about outside
That's a
of the
great
government?
question. And we talked about privacy last week, and I think it's a slippery slope, as you mentioned. What if we're selling this to Customer Border Patrol? They're using it to, profile people who they're looking to arrest. Is it now going to be shared with other law enforcement agencies that have people they're looking for? Is it going to be looking for people who are, in this country longer than they should be? All those. I'm not trying to politicize this whatsoever, but I'm just saying it's a very slippery slope with privacy. Once you start sharing data like that with these agencies, even they're internal, it may cross boundaries of what consumers understand their data to be used for. So just definitely something to talk about.
So just outside of any politics or anything like that, I'm not sure of, the airlines requirement to be able to turn this over. I mean, obviously, if the government wanted it for security reasons, sure, they should be able to have it, but do they need to buy it? So is that an ethical situation where they're selling your information back to the government? Is that ethical?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think
Right.
the data that they use for the no-fly list, Damian, through TSA and all those things, that is a partnership, and I think that that's not for sale. So the fact that they are selling this data is interesting.
Yeah. So as the consumer, they're selling my information. Shouldn't I get some of that back?
Hell yeah.
I mean, I'll fly. Look, if you want to give all my information to the government so I can fly for free, I might go for that.
Let me get a free coffee, right?
It's interesting that you say that because there's so many companies who are trying to figure out how to monetize our advertising, our preferences online, and us as the consumer get a piece of that, some kind of blockchain or Bitcoin or token or something like that, where all this data, every time our presence is used online to advertise to us, there's an exchange of money. Somebody's getting paid for your data so they can show you ads on Facebook, as an example. How could we monetize that so that you as the consumer get a benefit from your identity online? There's a lot of companies trying to tackle that, and it's very difficult nut to crack, to be honest.
That's right. I mean, if your information is going to be out there anyways, why can't I make money off it?
Mhm.
I mean, the criminals are making money off it, so why can't I get paid for it?
Well,
right?
yeah, it happens at the casino all the time. You see people walk in with
That's right.
with a fat stack of cash, and they walk out with their hands in their pocket. But they get a phone call like 6 weeks later, and they're like, "Hey, would you like a free stay?" I was like, "Yeah, I would take a free $200 a night, $300 a night."
Well, so here's the thing: it's not just the airlines.
Mhm.
Your credit cards do the same thing. And
I
so
think
if you're
everybody does. I
using-
mean, this is a consumer-driven world, honestly. If you're not paying for the service, you are the service, right? So, this is a very common thread. I mean, this particular article revolves around airlines, but they always said about Vegas, this place wasn't built on winners. To your point, Fern, people come here and they leave a lot of money in Las Vegas. That's how we have these nice billion-dollar casinos. But I think that the targeting is getting so specific now. If you walk into a certain casino, they're toying with technology that can actually show you your favorite game. They can change the game in the glass from Wizard of Oz to the Wheel of Fortune because you like to play it. So you'll sit down, you'll spend money. So behavioral analytics and advertising is a big, big business, and I think that this is just another part of that.
Well, why not? They're just all computer screens now, so everything can be customized to you, which it's great convenience. I mean, I'm waiting for the day where you just walk into the coffee shop and your app already knows what you normally order, so you don't even have to open up the app or order. Just walk up to the counter because it already knows your coming.
Yeah, could you imagine though? Like you go to the casino and it's just like a bunch of people playing the Buffalo game, Buffalo, and it's like, well, why? It's like because this is my favorite game, and then like the casino's like, yeah, he loses all the money on the Buffalo game, so we make sure we present him with the Buffalo game first. But so I guess go back to the other article or the same article is what I find interesting about it is there's actually a loophole here with the fact that these airlines are kind of coming together to form this ARC group, right? So they have access to this data. They're providing it to ARC, which is a separate entity of sorts, right? And what that then becomes is not the airline selling it, right? Because they're not. It's ARC. But now ARC is essentially falling into this category of a data broker, right? So they are now a legitimate data broker source, which is essentially a loophole to any legal ramifications to the airlines directly. So that's, to me, what is extremely interesting because it's not like Southwest is doing it. ARC is doing it.
Yeah, but they're getting the data from the airlines. So the airlines are selling it to the broker.
Well, the airlines I don't know if they're selling it directly to ARC, but it's almost like a group. So ARC is essentially this group of other entities, right? So whether they sell it or not, ARC is now being sold to sell to these government entities. So maybe they're passing it along. It's not very clear in the article. Maybe it's something to look into. But from what it looks like is the airlines provide it to ARC. ARC then sells it to CBP. So, and the way that works is ARC works in a way to where the airlines aren't directly selling it to CBP.
So I wonder if there's like a way you can do an add-on, right? Don't sell my data and you got to pay an extra $50 for
Like when you license music on YouTube. So like on our first couple episodes, we used an actual song in the intro music. And then by episode 4, we got caught.
we started to get actual viewers and actual
Yeah, well, I
subscribers.
wouldn't say we got caught. We just the because the music that I used was a free licensed version, but it sounded very close to the original. I think that's what set it off. But so very similar. Like we were using that music. I didn't pay for it, but I got it from a source that said it was free because they essentially remade it and it was a free thing. But then they're like, no, it's too close to the original. But with music, right? Like Sting gets paid, forget how much, it's like $7,000 a day to from some of the music he's licensed to other people.
So here's an interesting concept. Every time a telemarketer calls you or a cold caller calls you, shouldn't there be a fee? Like, hey, if you want to call me, you just want to ring my number, it's like $5 to ring the number.
That'd be nice. So there is a company that actually does that. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, and not to give them free publicity, but there is a company out there. I won't say who they are, but essentially the way that they work is they attach to your Google account, and whenever you get a message from a third party like seller or some company, you can send them a reply, like an auto reply that says, if you're interested in my time, you have to pay to get it. And what they do is it's a marketplace now to where people that could be sold to have a rate that they charge for people to pay. And the whole business model is if you're going to spend hundreds of thousands on marketing, why not spend hundreds of thousands and get directly to the people? And so they're paying these executives or people in this company or people that work for companies a dollar amount to get their time. And the whole idea is you're not paying for the time, you're paying for a response. And the way that they sell it is if you're providing the money to talk to the executives owe you an answer. And that is whether they're interested, they're not interested, but it's a worst case scenario, it's some form of critique to help you re-swizzle your marketing messaging. So it's kind of like a weird world where people are paying for someone else's time. It's not a bribe. They're paying for a service, and that service is input on their messaging. And if their messaging is already good, they might be interested in buying, right? So it's kind of like quasi what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, that's a gray area too. I don't know, Troy, how many times you get offered
100,000 times. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a gift card, take a call.
So
I don't do this. I don't do
them. Yeah. sure don't.
y-
Unless it's a company or somebody that I know and trust, because I love to give my time to hear pitches and startups and so on. But these we get thousands a day. Offers of $50, $100, AWS gift card, whatever it is. But
Or yeah, take a
those are
call
all.
from us. You see this on LinkedIn. Take a call from us and get a free
AirPods.
AirPods.
Yeah. Yeah. You show up to a meeting, AirPods, and it's like, open up your backpack, and it's like 10 AirPods in there. Like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
do these
But the
bad?
thing is, so I got on the other side of that coin is like I said before, I'm very, the amount of work that vendors have to go through to get your attention. I don't complain about anybody, but I don't think some of these tactics are appropriate. And I think Damien, you just touched on one of them where you're just,
So
giving
I mean, we're
$100
talking
for a
about
call.
airlines selling our information, but we know that there's data brokers out there that have already gathered who we are, where we work,
Oh yeah,
and maybe
for sure.
even technologies that we use today.
Mhm.
So this goes beyond just the airline. I mean,
I
Data's
always
everywhere.
thought it would be very, easy. Now, now that we're on the, VoIP, voice over IP, rather than the old plain old telephone lines, POTS lines. When phone lines were copper, anybody could plug into a copper line and have a tone and go out and make a phone call. But now we're over the internet. It should be fairly easy to require every person who has a telephone number to register that number to themselves, and have an identity that's tied to a phone number. And let's just say if you don't have that verification or certification, you can't make a phone call. That would stop every single spam, scam, all types of calls. If you can't get a phone call because that person hasn't validated who they are on the other end, I mean, that would be the easiest way to solve this problem. And, that's just my thoughts. Why haven't we done that?
Well, not that that's in place, but there is something coming right around the corner. I don't know if you guys saw this, but I now have an iPhone, trusty, dusty iPhone. I have an Apple Watch. I've got everything Apple, right? Mac, everything. I'm in the ecosystem, right? And it's awesome because let me tell you,
So people who don't know you, this is recent, by the way. There was a time where I'd have
I
to
was green.
text him in green. Now he shows up as blue.
So yes, on December 25th, I made the transition to Apple, right? And I was all right, whatever. I've had Apple in the past, but then I got it, and then I got the watch. Now my kids have the watches. They can call me. It's really annoying. They call me like they're just in the other room and they call me, right? So another story for another day. But I moved into the Apple ecosystem, and I'm like screen mirroring on my phone on the Mac, and then I'm like using like 5 fingers and doing these things. Like this trackpad is crazy. So I kind of feel like welcome to 2025, right? Now they just announced it at WWDC 25 that iPhones will have a way to gatekeep all the calls that aren't in your phone. And so instead of you getting a call, you know how you can have the setting to silent unknown callers? Now they're doing it with iOS 26, where essentially a cold call is being kept from even ringing your phone. And it'll say, who are you, and provide a reason for your call. And we'll let the owner of the phone determine if they want to accept your call. Very similar, but instead of having people be required to have a certificate to call, it's allowing the end user to accept the call or not before it even rings. So
Interesting.
and what's interesting about that is, so there's all these data brokers, right? There's Apollo, there's ZoomInfo, there's Seamless. There's all these companies that make their money off of selling your data, right? You pay $15,000 a year for a license to call anyone you want. And people are like, well, how'd you get my number? Like, oh, I got it from this platform. So what's interesting now is a lot of people are talking about how they're going to even make cold calls anymore. Because I don't know about you guys, but a lot of people that I've met that are at an executive level tend to have an iPhone, especially in like the security world. So it's like everyone in cyber security has an iPhone, right?
When this feature goes live, Fern, I mean, it might be everybody has an iPhone, because that seems like a pretty cool
That's the
feature
thing.
now. Did you say iOS 26? Which iOS are we on now? I've lost track.
Yeah, they with the new version, they're going to the year.
Yeah. So I think
Gotcha.
they're on 18 right now. So it's like 18.1 or something, but starting not this month, I think in July when the GA for iOS 26 comes out, because right now it's just for beta developers to use. So I think next month in July or August, so that's why I said it's around the corner, everything is streamlined or normalized to the year. So the Apple Watches, the Mac, the iOS, so anything Apple will be 26 plus. So then next year will be like 27. So
I thought I was way behind on security updates there for a second. I'm like, holy cow, we're already on 26. I'm in trouble.
like a small heart attack moment where you're like, update,
Yeah.
update. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that just came out. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but there is a lot of talk in the underworld of the sales underworld where I reside
Mm.
of people saying, "Hey, how are we supposed to call these people anymore if their phones won't even ring?" And it's like, I don't know.
Sorry if I'm not sad. Sorry, I'm not sad that my phone's not going to ring from cold calls.
But-
We've got to find a better way to engage with our customer base, period. And it's not cold calls. They don't work anyway. So
Yeah.
sorry, folks, if
No.
you think cold calls are the way to go.
It reminds me of a lot of times when people say it's a volume game. Like you just got to keep trying, and eventually you'll hit. Like playing the lotto. Like, okay, I just keep playing and eventually I'll hit it. Like maybe. But in the world of like sales, like once someone has your cell phone number, your phone is just going off all the time. Right. And so there's always, well, how do we get better messaging? I don't know. So that it's like the chicken or the egg. Do you invest in better messaging, maybe like organic socials, dark social channels, or do you go
Yeah.
through just calling someone direct, hoping they're expecting their car dealership to call them instead, or expect that they're between a meeting?
That's the thing, right? So for me, I don't accept any of those unknown numbers,
Mhm.
but once in a while I have to take that off because I might be expecting a phone call from a number I don't know where they're calling from. And it really makes me upset when a vendor sneaks in there.
I know. Yeah.
It's like, so, you guys know with my truck, right? The transmission went out. So I had to take that setting off, but I forgot to do it. So then the body shop or the people that have the truck now, they try to call me like 4 times in a row. And I am thinking like, man, I wonder if they have an update for me on my truck. It's like, then I look at my phone, missed calls, and it says like, I don't have the shop number. So
Yeah.
I fell into the same situation. Thought it was a little interesting, but
Fern, we talked about cold calling. So I get the question all the time, what can I do to get traction? How to get the attention of a CISO? And I heard a really interesting pitch this morning, which I thought was fairly unique. And I hear a lot of pitches, so I got to be honest with you. But this company is actually targeting startups who are just getting started, and their whole business model is helping them get that initial traction to get those first 10 customers, 20 customers, whatever. So I won't say any names here, but if you're listening, if you're curious, give me a LinkedIn message. But what a very unique way to do that, where you're just brokering
Cool.
relationships.
That sounds like a cool idea. I think I've heard of that
No.
one too.
No,
Still
it's
in
like you're
stealth, but yeah.
brokering relationships, right? And you're bringing people together. But the one gap in the whole sales market is helping startups get their first 10 customers, helping startups get their first 20 customers, because those are the most important customers of any startup. The VCs want to see traction. They want to see their companies that they're investing in, getting to a viable product. And the startups are like doing anything and everything to get their word out. So I thought it was very unique to see a company focused on that particular segment of the market. So sorry to interrupt on that. Back to, the talk at hand. But another fun fact before we go back is that Vegas does not have a lottery. You mentioned lottery earlier.
Then
Have
wait.
to drive to California or Arizona. They have no lottery in Nevada, which is interesting.
So wait, you can get down on sports betting, but you can't throw a random
Nope.
5 at a ticket?
No, you got to drive to
100%.
the state line.
What?
Yeah, no Powerball, no Mega Millions, nothing. So when it goes really big, like over $1 billion, a couple times it has, I had to drive over to, Arizona. I don't go to California because that one is just mobbed. It's
That
so
one is
packed.
crazy. It's a little bit closer, but that one is crazy.
So you know what you do, right? You just put a gas station at the border.
There,
That's what they
Oh,
do.
there is? Okay.
There's, yeah.
On both
Here I am
sides.
thinking I'm a genius. Someone else has
Yeah.
already done this. I didn't know that. I guess I've never. So here's the thing: is my wife likes to play the Powerball, but she never picks it up. I have to be the one to go spend $4 or whatever it is, and I'll do it maybe once a month, maybe once every few months. But she only does it when it gets to like 200 million plus, and somehow I justify the drive because I'm like, all right, $4 to win 200 million, like, yeah. But then we never win. We never win anything.
Well, what's the amount? There's a certain amount where it's positive EV.
I don't know. I mean, it has to be anything over 300 would be worth it, right?
Well, I don't know what the odds are, but even if it's like 700 million to 1, you have to wait
Oh, really?
to get positive EV.
Really?
Yeah.
There's no plus EV before. That's a good number to check. So here's an interesting thing: table games, right? they're table games where you can put $5 on a bet. So it can be $5 is at a very specific casino where they have new tables in the poker room. Okay. And I can't tell you how I know this, but I know. Maybe I'm there. And so they have $5 minimum bets, right? But the only thing that they pay on are if you get 3 in a row, so a straight, flushes don't count, a straight flush, so 3 consecutive of the same suit, or 3 of the same number. So 888, 777, any triple or any straight, any consecutive set of number cards, right? The odds for that are 0.3 or 0.03%. It's like 1 out of 400, something like that. But they're not paying 400 to 1 odds, right?
Oh, never.
So if you spike this, you get $50. So you're gonna play 10 times, you're gonna dust off $50, and you're never gonna win. But they set it as, oh, you can make all this money. So
no, that's always the benefit of house.
yeah,
right?
yeah. So I guess going back to casinos.
Maybe we should do like a podcast episode on casino games on that one. But sorry to take us off track. I didn't mean
Yeah.
take us on the rabbit hole.
No, it's I think we're right on track because we're right around the 20-minute mark. But it is interesting how one conversation about your data being sold, right, can lead to these other areas and other situations that it almost like permeates life, regardless of what you're doing. Like a story can kind of, I guess, through osmosis into other stories.
Yeah. Well, so bottom line, I mean, if you're shocked that the airline's selling your information, there's other people, other companies collecting information on you, probably selling that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I guess the one thing that you should always be aware of is maybe look at the tech that you're wearing, because that leads us right to the next article. Is it doesn't say which watch manufacturer, and if it does, I don't want to say because I don't need anyone ringing my doorbell, right? But we'll have the article posted with the episode, and what it said is essentially it's called Smart Attack. Okay, and with Smart Attack, what it's using is actually the microphone in smartwatches, blanket statement, no one specific, that's picking up signals from a PC, right, through a certain frequency, and you can't even hear it. So it's not like if your computer's like old and dusty, like a gaming PC or like an old PlayStation is sitting in the corner, it's just like humming along because it has no air circulation. Not that. So this actually falls in the inaudible range for humans. So 18 to 22 kilohertz, right? So, and what it does is it takes that, which that information could have keystrokes, encryption keys, and credentials. So,
Wait, are the computers emitting this by default,
let me see.
or do you need to have software on there?
Well, they should be.
I'll give an example, right? So you talk about air gap systems where you think there's no connection to the outside world, there's no internet connection, everything is in a bubble,
Mhm.
and that's how a lot of companies protect secrets and confidential data. But there was a research article happened a couple of years back where they were able to actually decode a lot of that just by viewing the blinky light on the hard drive. And so it's not that it's necessarily a software program or keystrokes or things like that. It's just the way that these parts operate and send off signals. They were able to decode some of those very important secrets. And so, to this article, what I was reading is that it's like, the smartwatches were able to pick up certain frequencies and decode either keystrokes or actual, information being transferred back and forth on the wire. So, I would just say to this article, I don't know any place that's a air gap system that allows smart devices, period. Like,
I was going to say that because
check your phone at the door. You have to walk on this very
Oh.
important anti-static strip. That's a piece of tape that you step on, and it takes all the static off the bottom of your shoes, and you have no phone, no watch, no anything that emits or
Oh,
could
really?
possibly emit.
yeah, I agree with that because I've gone into highly sensitive
Mhm.
areas. One of them may have been a government building where you're not allowed to bring your cell phone, your smartwatch, or any electronics with you. And I've also been in a major car manufacturer facility, and same thing. You're not allowed to bring your smart devices in that facility. So that includes smartwatches. So anything that's air gapped properly should not have people wearing
Anything.
your smartwatches
Okay.
in.
So the article does clarify, right, that the malware has to be present on both ends. So the air gap system and also on the wearable device, in this case, the watch. So yes, to your question earlier, clarifying, it's not one-sided, it has to be on both. But how does it get to both? Someone possibly wearing something they're not supposed to into this room, right?
Did you guys see the Edward Snowden movie where they, there's been several, but the one that was like a Hollywood production, he actually snuck out a USB stick in a Rubik's cube, and so that just goes back to the deception that's involved in trying to sneak something in or out of a air gap system. They usually have X-ray scanners. They have these certain detectors for electronics as you go in and out of the facility. So it'd be very interesting to see how they do that. But insider threat, as in this case, anything's possible. And by the way, if you have physical access to a system, it's just a matter of time before you can compromise it, no matter if you have the passwords or not. There's so many tools and techniques to get access to a system if you can put hands on it.
Yeah, I've never been into one of these facilities, like a government facility. I've been into data centers, but they've been locally run within an organization, right? So like some companies had a data center on site. You just kind of walk in, right? It's a sales guy just walking in. Apple Watch. I didn't have Apple Watch at the time, but like presumably could have, right? And no one stopped me. So when you guys say air gapped, this is a very specific case, right? So is there a concern with a data center that's not, you have an air gap portion of your data center, but your traditional data center, is there anything around allowing third party people into those rooms?
Oh,
Obviously
absolutely.
not like unguarded, but should that just be eliminated completely? Or like, should I have never seen those data centers, like where some people are like, hey, check out this new server, or hey, check out this. But you see it a lot on like LinkedIn where like a manufacturer will sell like a bunch of servers to a client, right? And they'll have a nice shiny rack with like the logo on it.
Yeah, but come on, have you ever been to a real data center? It never looks that clean.
No, I know, but that's what I'm wondering is like, is there a concern around that? Like, should people kind of take a second step and think about their practices around who they allow, vendor or not?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have to be in full control of who goes in there, who sees the equipment, because it's not just showing off, racks and racks of equipment. There's risk in having people come in there. I mean, what if they accidentally trip on something and pull out some connections? Or, we always joke about, maybe last week's internet outage was because somebody needed to plug in the coffee pot. There's no more outlet, so they unplug the.
That's so true.
So that we joke about that all the time. So that has to be controlled. You can't just walk people through, something that might be critical for your organization through a data center. Or
You know what I
even
find?
Oh,
sorry, I was going to say I find interesting is that I take for granted the fact that you and I, Damian, work around this stuff every day, but there's a lot of people that may not have ever been in a data center. So when you go in these places, the security that you have to go through to get into the places is quite extensive. You have to be on the list to attend. You have to go through metal detectors. But this isn't an air gap system. This is a data center. So you can take a laptop in because a lot of times you have to work on something that's in the data center. You go in with your laptop and all your cables, and you usually get to your particular racks, which may be amongst other customers' racks. Yours are locked with a key. Open your server closet. There are even some companies that rent out specific sections of the data center. So inside the data center, you can have your own fence and your gate, either mechanical or lock. You go in there, you close the door behind you, and inside those locked gates, there might be even another locked gate where it's just for super admins to go in. So these places are very interesting to go in and work around. They're extremely noisy. They're very cold because they have to keep them cold for the servers. And so it's just really interesting place to be. If you've never been in a data center, if you have the chance to go to one, take it because it's a very interesting tour to go through to see the power that goes into powering these things, to go into the different type of fiber hubs that have to come together so that everybody has connectivity. And not to mention the number one cost at any data center is going to be the cooling. Keeping the data center cold for these servers is absolutely critical and expensive.
But I mean, it's not just data centers that are air gapped, right? There are facilities that are maybe just an office space.
Yeah.
Where there's physical pictures and designs on walls and things that they don't want you taking pictures of, right? Or listening into conversation, recording those. And so a lot of these air-gapped rooms, they don't have to be in a data center like Troy's describing. And I've been in a lot of meetings where they're looking for any electronic device. And so you're not allowed to bring, they tell you, leave your watch. If it's a smartwatch, leave that in the car. Leave your smartphone in the car.
Yeah, I've never been
bring it in.
to the only air gap systems I've ever been to outside of data centers. Data centers are pretty much come and go. There's technical controls around it, but air gap systems are truly those, bio, pharma, air gap systems where you're not allowed to bring anything in. These technology rooms where they're building the next iPhone or television. I've been into those rooms where they're physically designing Samsung telephones. Those are air gap. Like they literally search you, pat you down, no electronics in, no electronics out, those kind of things. Those are the air gap systems. Military, high tech, biopharma. Those are where you find those air gap rooms where no technologies are allowed no matter what.
Yeah, I went to like I said, a major car manufacturer, and they had designs of their next model car, like actual models and everything. So they don't want that to get out at all.
Mm-hmm.
No pictures, no recordings of what potentially could be coming out. Pretty interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely want to keep those under wraps.
It kind of reminds me of like the cigar bars, or the not the cigar bars. The
How does that remind you of a cigar bar? That's so funny.
So I'm gonna tell you a story. There's a place out here called Wolf and Wren, or Wren and Wolf, one of the two, and they have this special room called the Champions Room. Have you heard of this place or no?
I've heard of it, never been.
Okay, I've been. Okay, I got pictures. So here's what's crazy about this place is this is like the air gap version of a whiskey room. Okay, and I've noticed a lot of people in cyber security, or just say security in particular, they always have whiskey events, right? So this place, it's essentially like a speakeasy where you have to go to the restaurant and you go to the back corner of the restaurant, and there's people literally sitting at this table eating, and you kind of walk around them, and there's a curtain that they pull off to the side, and there's a door. They open it right inside the store. Imagine like a mahogany mailroom.
Oh, I've been there. This is
yeah, and they have chandeliers made out of bullets, and there's bullets on the wall, and it's just bullets everywhere. And on an entire wall, probably 20 feet long, is hundreds of mailboxes made out of wood. Drop in a key, you open the box, put your phone in, close it, take the key with you, and then you walk just down the hall around the corner, and there's another door, and you walk in, and it's just full on bar that you can't take any device into. So
I think that's more for show. Troy and I went for dinner in Las Vegas. Similar thing, right? No pictures.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, Troy, we were taking pictures, and we got in trouble. Actually, one of our friends got in trouble for taking pictures of us.
Yeah, that was good.
Was it because they had the flash going?
No pictures. They don't
there's
want any
no
pictures in the restaurant.
Which restaurant is this? Can't say.
No, we'll take you there next time.
Okay, because this is interesting. This reminds me of like the dinner that we had a few weeks ago. We're like, "Oh, do you want me to bring my camera?" And you're like, "No, don't be weird." Like, well, maybe someone wants pictures. Maybe. Okay. Well, I guess we kind of got off track, but that's pretty typical, right? So go.
Yeah, and I think going back to the main point of the article with the air gap systems and the smartwatches, interesting article, very fun read, but I don't think it's realistic because
I
system's going to have.
This is what I would take from it, Troy. This is what I would take from it. It's okay, smartwatches today, but I think you have to remember that almost any electronic device could have malware on it.
Yeah.
Any electronic. And so just keep that in mind. If I think this article just brings that to the forefront of, what are you installing on your home network?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that camera from China that might have malware built into it already?
Yeah.
Right? Because we've seen a lot of that with a lot of more technologies coming up in home automation. At what point is your home going to act against you? Maybe just lock you out of the house completely.
Yeah, we have seen a few of those things. I will have to admit, when you're looking at $1,000 vacuum to vacuum your house when you're asleep, and then you see a $300 version on Amazon, you're like, all right, I'm gonna get the $300 one, and then you get it, and then you like, all right, let me get the application on my phone, and then it's in characters I don't even understand.
Well, see, here's the point, right? You're like, oh, I'm saving a bunch of money, but it's just a vacuum. It's just a vacuum, so why am I worried about that?
But it has to connect to your home network.
Well, you got to install the app, so now you've got maybe malware on your device, and then you have this, piece of equipment running around your floors listening to everything that you're saying. So I mean, I think that's what I would get from this article is that just remember everything is electronic device that's connected. Even my fridge tells me that it's time to change the water filter. So I don't know. Go back to the whole data, people selling your data. How many times is my refrigerator company telling me, like, keeping track how much water goes through that system and how many times I replace the filters, right? And selling that to Amazon so Amazon can automatically remind me to buy filters. It's a whole system.
scheme. It's a whole scheme that we got to find a way to get on the other side of, right? But what this makes me think of is there's a lot of stuff that people have to worry about, which probably means there's a lot of people in security that feel like they're losing their mind, which is interesting because on the next article, 53% of cyber department leaders have binoculars looking for their next job. Right? Now, I might happen to know a couple people that are in transition right now. I just got a text the other day from someone saying that they're no longer with the company that they were at before. I'll probably see them next week, potentially, right? So they're not in that role. They're taking some time off for the summer. They're going to be looking for their next gig. I can kind of understand that people get burdened with the requirements of the role, but I want to hear from you guys.
It's a high pressure industry, right? Right, Troy?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a little interesting that, taking it out of that context of just looking for your next role, that's always kind of been the CISO's a 36-month role for most people. Average lifespan of a CISO is 3 years for many reasons. I won't get into those and be accusatory, but there's a lot of reasons. But what really concerns me is the number of CISOs and security leaders who are pivoting out of security completely and doing something in a different industry or getting out of cybersecurity. And it's really, in my opinion, I've heard a lot of feedback from a lot of my peers that, the regulatory pressure on those folks like Joe Sullivan and Tim Brown over at SolarWinds and, just the extremely difficult role to do. So you have all the responsibilities. In other words, the SEC is coming down on you. All these compliance folks are looking at the CISO, why you're not secure, why you're not compliant, why you're not doing things. When in fact, as I said last week, the CISO has very little ability to push the button to do it. They can be an influencer to the CIO and tell them we need to improve our security by deploying this technology or patching faster. But that's not the CISO's ability to actually do. So the CISO gets the Wells notice, as Tim from SolarWinds did, gets hauled into court because he didn't, do his job. But at the same time, there's people on the other side of the table who don't care and aren't deploying the technology that the CISO, is advocating for. So it's just a very stressful job in that way. There's more personal liability that's coming about. There's more regulatory liability for the CISO personally coming about. And so CISOs are like, I'm going to probably go fishing in Montana for 6 months and figure out what I'm going to do next. And so that's I've
or
seen
leave
that.
security altogether. I've seen CISOs go and
they leave
open
completely.
restaurants.
Yes,
Yeah.
they leave completely. They open
I'm
a bar,
gonna run a restaurant,
sports bar.
a bar. Yeah.
So you guys, I thought he was kind of just not hyperbole, but like maybe like, oh, they're just gonna get out something else. Like, well, let's be clear, they're not gonna be Bob Ross, right? They're not sitting here making happy clouds for money, right? These are people that I just want to make sure I'm clear. When they get out, they've already been in this role for 10, 20 plus years. So essentially what you're saying is they're retiring early. They're not in their 30s. They just got a CISO role and then decided to quit and go open a restaurant. Or am I wrong? Like,
I've seen the whole gamut, right? I've seen folks retire early. I've seen young people leave the industry. I know a guy who left a very large social media platform and just completely went on to farming because he was taking on too much responsibility without any assistance. And I think that's going to continue to be the crux of the problem for a lot of CISOs. And, the job is hard. Long hours, you're on 24/7. Your phone is never off. Even when you're on vacation with your family, you could be across the world. You're still on for those type of calls. And so, it's a high stress, high pressure job. Sometimes very little thank you because you never get thanked for the breach you don't have, right? I mean, you just don't. And so it's a difficult place. So, my thought is to say, and I say this all the time to business leaders, to CEOs, to CFOs, lean into your CISOs. They're probably one of your best technical resources. They're going to advise you about, cybersecurity and mergers and acquisitions. They can give you strategy on which way your business is going to go from a product perspective. they're great resources. And then sometimes we get thought of as a technical resource that just goes sit in the corner. And if we need a new firewall, we'll call you. That's not the way to use a CISO. These are business leaders, not technical leaders today. And
But they should
acknowledge
be.
them. Yeah, they should be.
Yeah.
And you should acknowledge them, give them time and space, and understand what they're going through. And we have so many employee assistance programs out there for our employees. I just don't see the CISO either using it or being included in some of these really important programs that they need.
Yeah, I do. To your point, I do have a lot of friends that have reached out and said, look, I can't get whatever it is, enough budget. I can't get enough resources.
Mhm.
I don't think I'm being set up for success
Like I'm not being respected.
where I'm at. Yeah. And so I'm looking for a job. And I probably get at least one or two of those a month where they've asked me, hey, do you know
Mhm.
anything? But I can't really say, well, this person wants to leave, go try that place, because they may not be in a better situation, right? From what I'm understanding.
Yeah, yeah. So like you might leave one role because you just want them to leave, and you go to another place, and then you realize that nobody on the security team reports to you.
Potentially. I've seen
Right.
that, the CISO is only responsible for compliance,
Mhm.
but not the actual technical aspect of security.
Yeah. So it's like you kind of the grass is greener, but you kind of show up and you realize it was just spray painted grass, right? And it's still all dead under there. Like there's actually companies out
point.
there that spray paint.
Yeah, but you're also not allowed to plant seed or water.
Yeah, it just looks pretty,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been a CISO, so it's interesting to hear that there's still a lot of places. So let me ask you this then: this really only falls in like the enterprise space a lot of times, right? Because mid market and small business definitely usually don't have a CISO.
Well, they should have a head of security. Whether that's, I've seen it all from somebody being internal to, these virtual CISOs or fractional CISO
Yeah.
in my tire.
So that was going to be my next question: is because usually small business mid market don't necessarily have the funding, right? Or maybe it's not even funding; they just don't have the priority to put security in a certain position where they fund it properly. So they may not have these security leaders in these roles, right? So they go out to these MSPs, say, "Hey, what do you guys have? We have for a fractional CISO." So when Troy had mentioned how a lot of people leave to do something different, I've personally noticed there's a lot of people that I know that are getting into fractional roles, fractional marketing, right? Fractional revenue, right? So like fractional CRO, fractional security.
So from two sides of that. One, if somebody's leaving
Mhm.
to do fractional CISO jobs, you're just compounding the problem. So I don't see that happening, because instead of being responsible for one company, now you're responsible for five
But
or
are
six.
you really responsible?
Oh, if you're going to be the CISO, absolutely, you got to be responsible for their security program.
Oh, okay. I've never hired fractional CISO.
So then in that case, you wouldn't. I would say, look, if that's the case, and you want a fractional CISO, but they're not responsible for security, then you don't want a fractional CISO. You want a consultant,
Mhm.
right? That's going to hopefully give you advice and do what you tell them to do. But if you're going to carry that title, the fractional CISO or virtual CISO, you're going to have to be responsible for that company's program and their security strategy.
So like all these MSPs that offer fractional CISOs, or even like some of the large resellers that have a vCISO service, are they taking the responsibility and the burden?
They should be, right? Because there's going to be certain liability, unless the definition for them is not a true CISO. In that case,
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it a fractional or a vCISO.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Damian. I don't think it's what is under contract. That's not what it actually is. They call it that as a title, but to Fern's point, I think the larger the company, and especially if they're publicly traded, that's where the SEC has real teeth through the FTC to come in and go after the CISO legally. So these publicly traded companies, yes, there's going to be a lot of pressure for these guys. But as you get down into the small and the mid market, it's a little bit of different pressure, right? A lot of times you have a very shoestring budget and you're just trying to do the best you can with what you have. And so I think smaller business security leaders, they may not even have the title of CISO. They have it even harder because they're trying to make things work on a shoestring budget and tie things together with, tinfoil sometimes. But, kudos to them for continuing to try. It's a high pressure job. So, the smaller enterprises that do use fractional resources, that's a great idea, but they're just consultants at the end of the day. If you have a ransomware attack that's going to take your systems down, very unlikely that fractional CISO is going to carry any of that liability. on themselves. They've probably signed that all over back to the customer.
Well, you also need to have a separation, because if you're hiring that fractional CISO from the company that you're getting the security services from, there may be a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't hold their own company accountable. And so that's just one thing to look out for. If you're going to be hiring like a fractional CISO or a consultant, just make sure there's no conflict of interest.
Which would probably be purchasing product from the company.
Or purchasing product that only that company sells.
Oh, okay.
Right? So here's the tricky part. Like, if you are looking for a new tool in a certain space and you only go to one vendor and they only know a set of tools, then you're not getting the full story.
Okay. I can see that. So it's like layman's terms, if you have a BMW, you don't just take it to the Honda repair shop.
Oh, if you're going to buy a new car, yeah. If you're going to buy a new car and you walk into the BMW dealership,
And all they have is BMW.
trying to buy a Honda, they're probably going to say, "Oh, no," or a Mercedes. They're probably going to say, "No,
Yeah.
here's a better car for you." And they're only going to show you what they know, right? That's not their fault. That's where their expertise is.
That's why if you're going to buy a car, you got to go to Carvana.com. Right? Duh. If you're going to buy a used car, because they have everything. It's not like they're limited to just one.
Well, I've never bought a car through Carvana, but I hear they have a fantastic CISO.
Yeah.
Hey.
Shout
out to Dina.
Shout out to the one and only Dina Maddox. My brother actually bought a car from them, and he bought a truck, and there was a couple of things with it that he's a mechanic that he found, fixed it, and he was just like surprised because like I just called him up and said, "Hey, this is my issue." They sent him to a body shop, or no, he had to send take his car to the body shop, and they got an actual quote, send it to them, boom, like fixed. I'm like, really? It's like, yeah, all right, cool. Next time I'm gonna get something used. Although I think they're selling new now. I have to double check, but I think they're doing something new. But back to the CISOs leaving, right? Stressful job. You're never actually unplugged. You're probably at dinner. Your watch is ringing. Now I'm not a CISO, right? But when I eat dinner now, I have to turn my Apple Watch to theater mode. So I just hear it bzz, 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 bzz all the time while I'm eating dinner. And before I would always check it. Like I would look at it, oh, okay, this is happening or this is happening. My wife told me, can you just like turn it off? Because like someone would be talking and then I all of a sudden just like look at my watch, right? So I imagine it's like that for you guys, more so, but all day long, weekends.
Yep.
So the grass isn't always greener. So if someone's looking to get out of their role, what's the best way? Like, do you do consulting? Because vCISO has the same responsibility, but now you've compounded it to multiple organizations that, mind you, are probably at different stages in security maturity.
Yeah. So consulting is, to me, right, this consulting piece is different than the vCISO. I think if you take the vCISO title, you're responsible for the security program. But you can be a consultant advisor to a CISO, right?
So, follow-up question. Not everyone in security should be a CISO.
Oh, not everyone in security should be in security. Take that one.
So, in that case, there might be a lot of people with a title that isn't aligned with their skill set. Nothing wrong, right? Nothing wrong with that. It's just that maybe they don't have the full scope of what the role requires. And maybe that's part of the reason why they're inundated with issues, is because there's a high percentage of people that just don't have either the technical side or maybe the compliance side, right?
No, I don't think so. I think
I don't get it.
okay,
Yeah.
and I don't want to speak for Troy, but I think it is a high pressure job. So even though these people might be enjoying what they do and they're very good at it, it just becomes maybe a point in your life where you're like, why do I want this pressure to be, let's say, an operational CISO, right?
Yeah, and I want to
Because
say
there are
too
other
that
CISOs out there that
there's
don't
a lot of
own
CISOs.
a program.
There's a lot of CISOs that they don't want to admit burnout, but burnout happens to a lot of CISOs, and it happens very quickly because of all the pressure and this stuff. And I've only worked with people who are excellent operators. There's very few CISOs that I know that I would say they don't need to be in that role because they don't have the technical or the business acumen. But I think that CISOs are afraid to admit that they are experiencing burnout. So we have to remind ourselves. And I want to, tell all CISOs or any security leaders listening, it's like, pay attention to your body, pay attention to your breath, yourself, your stresses. There's a gentleman who started running marathons. He tells a really good story about how he tracked his health over time. He almost died. He had a heart attack, almost died, started running marathons so he could live longer. But the same thing when I was a police officer. Police officers don't have a long lifespan after retirement because of the high stress of the job as a police officer. CISOs are going to experience the same thing. So you have to pay attention to your body, to your heart rate, your stressors, your blood pressure, all those things, because after work you need to be with your family. You need to find something that you love. Be passionate. I love golf. That's my outlet. I like to go on the golf course with friends and just let my mind turn off for a few minutes. And sometimes you can't do that because the phone's always ringing. But try to find coverage, somebody who can watch the wires for me while I step away. I think all CISOs and security leaders need to have that outlet. Spend time with your family, do something fun, get away, find someone to cover you for 4 or 5 hours and turn your phone off. That is a scary moment, but at the same time, it's so refreshing after you do it. So please, security leaders and CISOs, take that time for yourself.
Yeah. Or go have whiskey and cigars on Fridays at a very special place.
Undisclosed because I don't want to. Yeah.
We can't talk about the secret spot, but it exists. Yeah, I know a lot of people that do. They go out and so I know some people that paint for like an outlet. Golf is definitely a big one. I know someone that's not in security, but he's always golfing. Always golfing. Like I got a call from a buddy of mine. He's like, "Hey, you want to go golfing with us?" I'm like, kind of last minute, but I can't. So definitely, I think what the takeaway is, maybe find something that you enjoy doing that's personal to you. Right?
Yeah. But I would say, if you feel like you have to be the first responder to all of these alerts, then you really haven't designed your team.
Oh, so you're saying kind of like level it
Right.
to where the higher tier, higher priority.
Well, it should be like a pyramid.
Yeah.
You should have a lot of analysts at that lower level base of the pyramid. And actually that you need to have a strong base. If you don't have a strong base, that pyramid is going to tip over.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it kind of just filters up. And so by the time it gets to the top of that pyramid, it should be the really, really, really important.
Yeah, not the little things. Like, okay, I think that makes sense. And I think, so this maybe even goes back to like personal life too, where I think a lot of people, so let me take a step back. There's a lot of people that I've known over the years that are very technical. And because of that, they almost view others not as lower or less than, but they look at them as like, well, I know I can do it, so I'm just going to take the responsibility and do it myself. Because I know if I do it, I'm going to do it right.
That's not even like a CISO question. That's a basic leadership conversation.
Yeah. That's kind of where I was getting at is like if your mindset is as a person, because you're very technical, you just want to do it because you know it's going to get done right when you do it. There is a point at which you have to release control.
I see that in a lot of entry level managers.
Okay.
Like people just stepping into leadership and just stepping into management where they have a hard time letting go.
Mm-hmm.
It's a balance because it's not like you totally let go, but it's also not like you totally
you don't control it, but you.
So as you start to transition up this path to leadership, there's a balance between, how much do I get into the weeds versus, be on top of it and trust that the team has it.
So I think that's kind of what I was getting at is if you're in a leader role and you don't have guardrails around your personal space and your personal time or your personal life, you might find yourself getting burnt out a lot quicker as a result of just not leveraging the people on your team, right?
Yeah. But there's a balance there, right? You can't just say, okay, I'm not taking calls.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that that's covered. That's your responsibility as a leader to make sure that the company's not going to go down if you don't answer your phone.
But it kind of reminds me of a situation where if I owned a restaurant, right, which you said some CISOs leave security to open a restaurant, and if they got a notification on their watch every single time an order was made wrong, right, you wouldn't want to own a restaurant because it happens all the time. People are always complaining about their food. It wasn't warm. It showed up late, whatever. it
I'm
wasn't.
not going to Fern's restaurant. I'm not going to your restaurant.
I can guarantee you my food would never have any of these issues. But like, if you think about it in the context of how many issues happen, and if they all bubbled up to the owner of the restaurant versus the floor manager, right? Or the department head of maybe the bar department head or whoever runs the bar, and they went all directly to the owner, I could see how someone would just be like, oh, restaurant's such a headache. But it's not. It's the fact that the processes in place and how you manage all of the different levels of owning the business, right? If you allow them to make it to your desk, well, you're going to be quitting before you even start. So I think if you think of it in that context, it's like, I don't need to know every single thing that comes out of the SOC, right? I don't necessarily care. I mean, I care, but I don't care enough to be notified. And when I get notified, it should be very specific instances. And I think there's a lot of people that look at it as, this is my department, I own it. It's my responsibility. I have to take care of everything. And what they lose sight of is their personal space, their personal time, or the things that make them happy, because they're spending so much time doing work that they forget about themselves. And I think a lot of people are burnt out with the work. They're burnt out because they've lost a part of themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot more complicated than that, because I don't think any of these leaders, the CISOs that are leaving, are bad leaders.
No,
I
exactly.
think some of them are great, right? So it's not the fact that I want to make it clear that we're not saying that they're leaving because they've designed bad programs and they're bad leaders.
Mm-mm.
I think the nature of the job is extremely stressful and demanding.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you build in a really good team, there is just some things that you're not in control of.
Yeah.
That maybe you're being held accountable for. Right. And so, Troy brought up some great examples where now we have personal liability potentially. Right. We saw what Joe Sullivan went through. I don't want to go through any of that. Do you, Troy?
Not at all. No, thank you.
No. So get E&O insurance, or at least find a way to build it into your compensation plan. I heard this trick from someone where when it comes to negotiating their package, they actually figure out how much it costs for E&O insurance and the charge for that, and they build it into their compensation plan as part of to help cover their personal expense of being an executive, right? And I was like, wow, that kind of blew my mind. Like, so the company still pays for it, but they pay for it through your salary. We are running pretty close to the end of the time that we have scheduled today, so I think we got some good topics, right? Next week, we're going to cover the outage that happened last week, because hopefully a lot more things come out as far as what happened with the whole internet crashing. We talked about the smartwatches or smart devices in air gap systems and the risk around that. We talked around the fact that airlines are selling data through a third party to, probably find a loophole, right? Potentially. So be aware of that. And then the last thing we talked about was, where, maybe finding a balance if you're in security and not burning out so soon and looking for your next role. So I guess any closing thoughts from the two of you guys on those topics?
Yeah, and for the record, doing a podcast is not the out from being.
No, and this is okay. I made a post about this the other day. I think it was like sometime last week. Podcasting does not pay any money.
Actually, it costs us money.
Costs a lot of time too. There's times where I'm working on the stuff and my wife, she sees the laptop and she already knows what I'm doing. And the other day I went out and I took my laptop with me. It was like 8:00 at night. I said, where are you going? I was like, I'm going to go do this. Okay. Well, why are you taking your laptop? Because I got to do some stuff for the podcast. So if you're looking at doing a podcast, just know that it's not going to pay you any money, but you get to meet some really cool people along the way. So
That's right. Yeah, my closing thoughts, Fern, would be find your zen. For all the CISOs and security leaders out there under a lot of pressure, we know what it takes every day for you to do your job, so just find your zen and get away.
find your zen if you want to win.
There you go.
Yeah, cheesy. Just put me in a bag of Velveeta. So I guess with that, we're out. We'll see you next week for some more topics around the internet breaking. Take care.
See ya.
Cheers.